Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, quite a few months ago, I had done a video talking about foreclosures and how the lack of these foreclosures, because of the forbearance that the government is basically helping the people out with not having to make their payments on their mortgages and stuff. But these foreclosures, these lack of foreclosures, are backlogged into the system, and at some point they're going to come flooding in when the people who couldn't make their payments still can't make their payments, and they're going to either need another stimulus package or some more forbearance or whatever it is that they're going to need to do in order to stay in their house. Otherwise, they're going to have their homes foreclosed on. Now, what my argument was back there in that video that I had put out, 2 or 3 months ago at least, I said that there are some natural occurring foreclosures. People lose their jobs, have death in the families. Something occurs in which that they need their home foreclosed on. I mean, it's just a naturally occurring thing that just happens within the industry. And when you have this forbearance, you mask over all those foreclosures. Basically, they're not coming into the system when they should be there. Now, when the forbearance ends, all these foreclosures that should have been in the system are going to come flooding into the system because they should have been there in the first place and being dealt with, but they're not being dealt with because of the forbearance. A lot of the people who have been on the forbearance, they are going to be able to stay in their homes. They did get their jobs back. They are able to make their payments, and they're going to be able to restructure their loans or whatever it is. They're going to stay in their homes. But there is plenty of people out there who should have had their homes foreclosed on, and now we're seeing the signs of that flood of people coming in. Now, although the foreclosures are down like 80% from year over year, which is like huge. I mean, there should be, like, if there was 100% of the foreclosures from last year as there is this year, then we wouldn't have to worry about this major flood of foreclosures coming in. I mean, sure, we would probably still see some, but right now we're sitting at 80% of what we did last year in foreclosures. So all these homes that should have been there are going to come flooding in, and it's starting to happen because there's a 20% increase in foreclosures from last month to this month. And I'd only assume that we're going to continue to see this uptick until we reach 100% of year over year, and then on we go with the major foreclosures from all the people who should have had their homes foreclosed on and all the people who have not been able to successfully basically get their finances in order during this pandemic. All right, so foreclosures are going to be happening here probably in a very dramatic scale going into the next year as all these forbearances end. Commercial real estate. Also, I found an article on commercial real estate and how that's having issues right now as well. Same thing. People are having a hard time, basically doing business, getting people out to the stores to, spend their money. And a lot of companies, a lot of these small time shops and stuff like that are starting to fail. And so these commercial real estates are having issues with their properties as well, and you're starting to see the value of a lot of commercial real estate coming down. So not only are you seeing like a major problem starting up in the residential, the commercial is definitely showing signs of cracking. Now, in my mind, I think, okay, so there's going to be a lot of people preparing for this downturn in real estate, and they're going to be picking up some really good deals come here in the future. And billionaires and some really savvy investors are not the only ones, because foreign investors are lining up to get ready for this as well. See, they recognize the possibilities of what's coming here in the future. And I'll leave links to all these down there. It just kind of makes me wonder how long this is going to take and what it is that the Federal Reserve is going to do once this happens, once these foreclosures really start kicking in. Like, what are they going to do to try and save the real estate market? You can buy all the mortgage-backed securities you want. If people are not making the payments, it doesn't matter. I mean, you could buy them all up. You're just going to hold a bunch of toxic assets that don't do anything, and you're going to end up failing by holding them. I mean, I just don't see that the Federal Reserve is going. I mean, they could. I mean, they very well could hold a bunch of toxic assets and just, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I mean, you guys let me know down in the comment section, because it just, to think that, if we go into a major downturn in real estate and nobody wants to hold those mortgage-backed securities, the investors, because the payments aren't being made, and those investments are turning belly up. And so the Federal Reserve has to print up a bunch of money with their quantitative easing and buy those mortgage-backed securities. Like, if you're not familiar with how a mortgage-backed security works, like most of the people on this channel understand like a lot of what I talk about. If you don't, I mean, if you go back into my earlier videos, I have plenty of stuff that I have talked about as far as leading up to these events. But if you're not familiar with the mortgage-backed security, a mortgage-backed security is basically a bunch of home loans put into a box and then sold off to an investor. So as these home loans are paid back, the investor is paid back not only their investment, but the interest that these home loans pay as well. Nice thing about holding these mortgage-backed securities is that as interest rates drop into the future, you're able to sell those mortgage-backed securities for a profit. It's very much like a bond is. And the Federal Reserve had picked up a bunch of these mortgage-backed securities during the Great Financial Crisis, known as toxic assets, because they had basically shadow banking systems had created so many of these toxic assets, these bad bank loans, and put them into these really bad mortgage-backed securities. These banks were going to fail like miserably if they continued to hold on to these things. And so the Federal Reserve was just like, okay, we'll step up our efforts and we'll basically relieve you of these toxic assets and we'll put them on our balance sheet in cleaning up your balance sheet. And that's pretty much how the Federal Reserve bailed out the big banks when, it came to all these bad bets they had made with the real estate market. It's really sad. Really, they should have just let them fail, because then we wouldn't be in the same position essentially again right now, where the Federal Reserve is going to have to do something, or else the real estate market essentially is going to fail if they do not step up and do the exact same thing again. Now, could they have another tool in their toolbox that they haven't yet talked about as far as being able to bring out and save the real estate market with? I guess, maybe, I don't know. But it seems to me that they've already talked about stepping up their efforts in buying mortgage-backed securities, so it sounds like they're ready to do it again. And, how that can end, or how that will benefit the average person out there, the average working class person, is beyond me. Because really what that is going to do is it's going to separate the possibilities of the average working person. Because like, you think about it, all the efforts of the Federal Reserve so far has not made it easier for people to get into homes. It has made it more difficult. Okay, and regardless of what people say with the interest rate drops and being able to make payments easier and the easier access to loans, none of that matters. Just look at the inventory. If you cannot find a house to buy and all the houses out there are so damn expensive you can't get into it, then there's no point, or it doesn't matter how low the interest rates are. So the Federal Reserve has not made it easier on anybody anywhere, except for maybe the super rich. All right, sorry about the babble. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Uneducated Economist. I will leave links down in the description for you guys. You let me know.